Be Hero presents Sheroes.
Hi everyone, Alicia here.
And Amy.
And we're asking the so-called heroes to step aside for a moment so that we can give the sheroes their turn in the spotlight.
Yes, you heard right. Welcome to Sheroes, a podcast by Be Hero Media.
So just sit back because it's time for the real game changers to show you how it's done.
This week we wanted to talk about Hilda.
If you care about spoilers and you haven't watched the series or read any of the graphic novels or tie-in books, you might want to look at that before listening.
Still here?
Last chance.
Okay, welcome to Sheroes. Okay, Alicia, so who is Hilda?
Well, Hilda is an adventurer who spends her time exploring, which includes rescuing and befriending various people or beings and creatures, and also includes conflicts with characters who are hurting others. She has blue hair, which we have no idea where it comes from, nor do we have any idea who her father is. I don't think it is ever mentioned, but her father doesn't seem to be a defining part of her character. So, where is she from?
Well, we don't know exactly where she's from, but we can guess that she is from somewhere in Scandinavia because trolls are a big part of the story, and trolls are at least a big part of Norwegian folklore. We haven't done too much research on Sweden or Denmark, so we don't know if it's a big part of their folklore, but I suspect it's pretty similar.
The other reason we know it is Scandinavia is because she mentions the fjords, and there's a funny brief scene in the show where we learn that she is a disruptive student, and she asks the class why an ancient Norwegian king lost a battle when he had the superior ship.
Yeah, I believe that was Olay Tryggvason. I don't remember, but we'll put it in the comments for you. Let's not forget about the Great Raven. He's actually a thunderbird who is credited as being one of the gods' ravens.
Odin's.
I don't remember it mentioning his name. I just remember it being super obvious that it was Odin because he's a one-eyed god.
I think they do.
Okay, you're probably right.
All right, so why is Hilda a shero?
So we've got a few examples we wanted to share here. In the first episode of the Netflix series and the first graphic novel, it starts with her helping a troll. It's funny because it happened because she was wandering in the forest and came across a troll that was currently in its stone form, and she wanted to draw it. So she put a bell on its nose so she would know when it was time to leave. Since she had read parts of a book that showed trolls eating humans, and the book said, that they didn't like bells. And since she didn't want to be eaten, and as a natural adventurer, she wanted to draw pictures of it. And so for this reason, she had her fox? Fox?
I don't remember what he is.
Deer fox. Okay,
yeah, deer fox.
The deer fox put the bell on the troll's nose. And it's kind of funny because actually there's this story in Norway, and it probably actually was in several towns, where the townspeople, to keep the trolls out, they would ring the bells. And incidentally enough, they never had a problem with trolls. So anyways, after the sun goes down, Hilda is still drawing the troll and finally notices that the troll is moving. So she basically, she runs away, and the troll follows her all the way home. And when the troll gets to her house, she notices that the troll is just frantically trying to get the bell off its nose, but it can't actually reach the bell. So then she goes and takes the bell off of its nose, and the troll returns her book that it had swallowed in thank you.
This is a good scene to talk about because you could argue that she put herself in this situation. And in the book, we even find out if she had finished reading her book about trolls, she would know that using bells to keep trolls away is regarded as cruel. But she did remove the bell, and after learning this new information, she changed her ways. Throughout the series, we see her having conflict with certain other characters and their treatment of trolls, many of which did involve the bells.
So in another adventure, she and her mother are at odds with the little people known as elves because she and her mom cannot see them, and so they don't understand their impact on the elves. The elves send warning after warning in the form of a tiny letter. Then they finally attack the house. Hilda manages to get the elves out of the house, and she writes a letter back asking, "What do we need to do to fix this?" That night, she gets a visit from one of the elves named Alfer. He has her sign paperwork to be able to see them, and she is then able to see them and finds out that her home is surrounded by villages of the elves. She mentions to Alfer that maybe, if the elves weren't so picky about who sees them, then just maybe her granddad would have built their home somewhere a little less populated, and then she and her mom wouldn't have to move.
She then takes the opportunity to befriend the elves, so she and her mom, at this point, they are planning to stay. And it works beautifully until they have an encounter with a mountain giant who accidentally crashes their home.
Yeah, and so I think this demonstrates some things to be admired because she learned something and she changed. And she wasn't angry with the giant for destroying her house because she understood how her own size was impacting the elves and just kind of how traumatic it is, really.
So one of our favorite instances that really shows her heroic side is in the episode The Storm. In this episode, the town gets a blizzard dumped on them, and she rides the Great Raven to the weather station to figure out what is going on and how to fix it. She gets there, and the meteorologist Victoria Van Gale seems to be untroubled by everything, but eventually shows them that she can make small changes to the weather. She also mentions that she tried to lure the weather spirits there, and the weather spirits were all fighting, which was causing the blizzard.
So Hilda flies into the center of the storm spirits and makes herself the moderator, so they eventually calm down and leave, which stops the storm and saves the day. However, we find the reason they were all fighting in the first place is because Victoria Van Gale had kidnapped a baby weather spirit, which Hilda helped to escape as well. After freeing the weather spirit, things calm down and her next adventure begins.
I think this is one of the most clear examples of why she is a shero and why we should admire her. And at least in this instance, this was not trouble of her own making.
Yeah.
I think often a lot of her adventures are trouble of her own making, but she, not every time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So one other example that we wanted to share of why we think she's a shero is when her friend David was having nightmares. They found out that his nightmares were being caused by the Mara, who like to find people who are scared and give them nightmares about what they're scared about. So David initially thinks that the nightmares are Hilda's fault, and she certainly does provide the material for David's nightmares.
Yeah, she's constantly taking her best friends on adventures with her. However, she is not the one actually putting the nightmares in David's head. Hilda tricks David's Mara into giving her the nightmare, and when she gets caught by the Mara, she convinces the Mara to try and scare her anyway. As long as her friend Frida doesn't wake her, then she agrees to no longer scare David. So Hilda has a nightmare, and the Mara agrees to no longer scare David. Afterwards, Hilda asks her friends to help her face her fear, the one from her nightmare.
So I love this example because not only does she help her friend with his nightmares, but she also goes to her friends for help, which is something that I think is admirable. And I think when we see our sheroes ask for help, it gives us permission to also ask others for help. So I think we can look to her as an example for going and asking for help. So Alicia, what are some things that you liked about her?
One of the things I love about Hilda is that adventurous spirit that we see demonstrated again and again. With her friends, she sees ghosts, Nissa, trolls, witches. Her friend even becomes a witch, and their adventures bring life to their world. And as someone who likes adventuring myself, I just love it. It just makes me really happy, like seeing it on Netflix or reading it in books. It just makes me really happy.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think that almost like seeing her adventures kind of makes me like open my eyes up more when I am out and about adventuring. So I also loved how going to school for her required bravery. It wasn't actually like she was homeschooled originally, so it was actually kind of scary for her to make that transition.
And especially because, her best friends were, elves and a deer fox and a giant. She didn't really know any children, and she'd never really been around anyone except her mom.
And the creatures of the woods.
Yeah.
And also, making friends was pretty difficult for her as well. And I would say that continued to be difficult for her. However, she made 2 amazing friends, and so it really wasn't a problem.
I also love how anyone who is friends with her is going on adventures. There's a funny story where her friend the elf Alfer, who was actually fired from his job of keeping an account of what goes on in Trollberg because they believed that there is no way his accounts could be true. So they sent his replacement, and when his replacement came, he too was brought along on an adventure, as were several others, and Alfer ended up getting to keep his job.
I love that story. I think it's pretty funny.
Which is better, the book or the show? I know you've read both, Amy.
Yeah, so I've actually read 2 of the books, and then I've seen all of the episodes so far for the Netflix show. And they are very similar to each other. Personally, I think the books are just a little bit better. It's like just a little extra. It's not anything major, but, it's sort of like, this might not be the best comparison, but it's kind of like the difference between a cheeseburger and a burger, right? They're both good, but the cheeseburger has cheese on it. And that's kind of like what it's like for the book and the show. It's just barely better. And just those little details, those little extra details, I think just enhance it and just make it a little bit better. So, Alicia, where can we find her in the media?
So if you want to get to know her better, she can be found on Netflix's show Hilda. She also has 6 graphic novels and 6 fiction books. And we're going to go ahead and put links for them in the comments.
Awesome.
Well, that's all we have for you.
We hope you enjoyed our show. And as always,
be brave.